Disclaimer: viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is based on dramatized testimony inspired by federal courtroom reports from the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Nobody expected him. The room was tense, eyes fixed on the witness list until the back doors opened and Will Smith walked in. Gasps echoed across the courtroom. Even the judge paused, stunned. There was no announcement, no pre-written statement. Just Will Smith, stepping forward alone. Until that moment, he had remained silent. His name had swirled through court leaks, rumors, and whispered audio recordings that were said to be too disturbing to release. But something had changed. Maybe it was the betrayal. Maybe it was that tape. Maybe it was the years of pressure and silence. Whatever it was done hiding. He wasn't there as a celebrity. He was there as a man who had seen too much and said too little. And when he began to speak, the courtroom wasn't ready for what was coming. What was revealed wasn't just shocking, it was a warning. It had started like any other day in the Diddy trial. Journalists murmured. Lawyers whispered. The usual courtroom rhythm. But when the doors opened and Will Smith walked in alone, no entourage, no legal team, just him, the atmosphere froze. Some thought it was a stunt. Others thought it was a mistake. But the way Will walked, slow, focused, stripped of his fresh Prince charm, told everyone this was real. Even Diddy, smug and relaxed moments earlier, visibly tensed. Will made no eye contact. Not with the press, not with the judge, and certainly not with Diddy. He took the stand and said, "I wasn't asked to come here. I asked if I could speak." The judge allowed it. From that moment, the entire energy in the room shifted. Because this wasn't part of any media story. It wasn't a leak. This was something Will had kept buried for years. It began, he said, at a party. "I've kept a lot inside for a long time," Will began. "I've laughed on red carpets. I won awards. I've made movies about honor and strength. But none of that can erase what I saw, or who made it happen." Then, slowly, he turned toward Diddy. "You did." Will explained that the invitation came through a mutual contact. Someone he'd worked with before. It was framed as a simple celebration. Diddy's birthday. Just music. Networking. The usual. "I've been to parties like that," he said. So I didn't question it. But the moment he arrived at the mansion in the hills, he knew something was wrong. Black SUVs out front. Security everywhere. The second I stepped inside, they took my phone. They said it was for privacy. But it felt like control. Inside, the lighting was dim. The music strange and hypnotic. No visible cameras, but mirrors covered the walls. It felt like someone was always watching. After a few drinks, Diddy approached him. He said, "Now you're part of the family." But the way he smiled, it wasn't warmth. It was ownership. Diddy led Will into a back room. Will thought it was about business. What I saw shook me to the core. There were performances, men and women, some he recognized from the industry. Others looked far too young. Guests watched as if it were entertainment. And Diddy? He was laughing. "I didn't know how to leave," Will said. And that was the point. Once you're in, you're in. A few days later, he got a call from a blocked number. "Hope you had fun, Fresh Prince," the voice said. Then silence. Weeks later, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, a flash drive. Almost didn't watch. But I did. It was footage from that night. Me on a couch. Out of it. Laughing at something I didn't remember. And in the background, I heard Diddy's voice. "That's how we keep him." Will said in that moment, he realized something terrifying. I wasn't invited. I was initiated. From there, the manipulation began. More invites. He declined. Suddenly, roles disappeared. Collaborators ghosted him. Online rumors exploded. About his marriage, his mental health, his sexuality. I knew what it was. It was pressure. Diddy didn't need to say it. Silence was the price for peace. So he stayed silent. He smiled through interviews. Ignored the whispers. Worked. Survived. But every time someone else spoke out, Cassie, Don Richard, even Meek Mill, he asked himself, "If they're speaking, why am I still quiet?" Then he looked around the courtroom and said, "Diddy didn't just ruin careers. He made people afraid to speak. That's why I'm here." He paused, leaned into the mic. It wasn't just a video. That was the leash. From then on, he said, every project felt like it had strings attached. Event invites came. He'd decline. Then, suddenly, the green light on a film would disappear. It wasn't once. It was a pattern. Diddy didn't make direct threats. He had systems that did it for him. PR firms, bloggers, producers, casting execs. He knew who to call. He knew how to make problems appear or disappear. Will described a specific moment in 2013. He had been in final talks for a major international campaign with a top luxury brand. Will continued his testimony with a chilling clarity. We were in final negotiations, he said. I'd already shot the first lookbook. Out of nowhere, they dropped me. No explanation, just silence. 2 weeks later, another invitation came for another Diddy event. I declined again, Will said. And that's when the phone calls started. Then the blogs, the gossip sites, stories about me that were oddly specific. Stuff only someone with access could have planted. It was a pattern, he explained. A tactic, psychological warfare. You start to feel paranoid. You wonder if it's in your head. But then the dots connect. The patterns appear. The punishments. And you realize it's not in your head. It's real. You're being boxed in. Will told the court he wasn't the only one. I know other celebrities who've been through the same thing. Some of them are watching this trial. Some are under contracts they can't break. Others are too scared to speak, afraid of being exposed, like I was. Then he turned toward Diddy. You didn't just collect people, Will said quietly. You controlled them. And the entire courtroom understood exactly what he meant. But Will didn't stop there. He described how Diddy's grip extended beyond artists, in a Hollywood's very foundation. You couldn't walk onto a major stage, he said, without brushing shoulders with someone Puff helped put there. He recalled attending a charity gala in 2016 where, behind the scenes, powerful figures from music, film, politics, and tech all gathered around Diddy, thanking him like he was the glue holding their world together. I watched a high-level exec from a major streaming platform hand him a USB drive, Will said. He whispered, only you have the final cut. Will didn't reveal what was on the drive, but the implication was enough. Diddy wasn't just networking, he was gatekeeping. He described watching other public figures, actors, rappers, CEOs, act overly deferential to Diddy, laughing too loud, deferring in every conversation. I realized most of them weren't his friends. They were his survivors. Will said he had stayed silent for years out of fear that speaking out would get him blackballed. But then I realized something. I'd already been blackballed. Quietly. No official blacklist. Just rumors. Doubt. Doors that stopped opening. He credited his audience, the public, with keeping his career alive. That's the one thing Puff couldn't control. The people. Over time, he started seeing things differently. He looked back at old photos, videos, interviews. Diddy was always there. If not physically, then through influence. And then came the moment that changed everything. Will's voice dropped. I stayed quiet for 20 years. I convinced myself it wasn't real, that it wasn't happening, or that it wasn't happening to me. Then came the audio tapes. At first, I didn't believe it. Then I got a call. Not from a lawyer, not from a journalist, from someone I used to trust. They told him, Will, you're on one of the tapes. They played it yesterday. People are talking. He described the sensation as if the floor dropped beneath him. I didn't even know that tape existed. But once I accepted that it might be real, everything started connecting. He spent that night awake, replaying memories. The party, the blackout, the envelope, the phone calls. It was all a system, and I was one of the victims. The breaking point wasn't fear, it was humiliation. I realized if I didn't speak now, my silence would become my legacy. And I couldn't live with that. He thought about his children, his grandchildren. They're going to see these headlines. One day, they're going to ask questions. And I needed to make sure my voice was part of the answer. So he called the prosecution himself. I told him, I'm ready. Ask me anything. Then, he turned to the jury. I wasn't just coerced. I was played. I was filmed. And I was used. He looked straight at Diddy. And you knew exactly what you were doing. Will paused, then closed his eyes briefly, as if preparing to relive something he had spent decades trying to forget. When asked by the prosecution if he wanted to hear the audio, Will said he hesitated, but he knew he had to. They played it behind closed doors. No press, no jury, just me, the judge, and the attorneys. He remembered what he heard. It was me, laughing. But it was hollow, not real. I sounded drunk, no drugged. He described the soundscape. Slow music, low voices, cheers, distant shouting. Then he heard it. Diddy's voice, clear as day, saying something like, "That's how we break them in." Then his name. They were saying my name, while doing things I don't even want to repeat. It wasn't just humiliating. It was dehumanizing. That tape, it took something from me. His voice cracked. He looked down, took a breath, and continued. I never consented to being filmed. I never agreed to be part of that. But Diddy kept the footage. Maybe to use. Maybe just to have. For years, Will had struggled with anxiety. With unexplained panic during simple interviews. Now I know. I wasn't crazy. I was remembering what I didn't want to remember. The audio had forced him to confront the truth. The grooming. The manipulation. The betrayal. But what shook him most? It wasn't what I heard. It was what I didn't remember. He looked at the jury. If you want to know how powerful Diddy is, ask yourself how someone like me could be silenced for 20 years and not even realize it. By the time Will's testimony hit the internet, it was too late to contain the fallout. Clips went viral before the bailiff could even say reset. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Our Will Speaks. Hashtag Freak Off Tape. Hashtag Diddy Files. And for the first time, the public didn't see Will as the polished A-lister. They saw a survivor. Will said, I knew once I spoke, things would get ugly. But I didn't know how fast. Within 24 hours, 2 brand deals vanished. A studio halted promotion on his upcoming film. But he didn't flinch, because I already lost something more valuable years ago, my voice. He received messages, some in support, some in warning. One said, you don't know who you just declared war on. Another, you've made yourself radioactive. He nodded when the prosecution mentioned names like Kevin Hart, Meek Mill, Lucian Grange. This isn't just a Diddy problem. This is an industry built on silence. And everyone's been trading in that currency. He knew more tapes could surface. More footage. More rumors. Let them come, Will said. I'm not here to protect myself. I'm here to protect the truth. He expected denial. Attacks. Smears. They'll say I'm bitter. That I'm unstable. That I'm lying. Then he asked the courtroom. But if I was lying, why wait this long? Why speak now, when I've got more to lose than ever? And with that, he delivered a final line that silenced the courtroom. Sometimes the truth comes late, but it still hits like thunder. For his final statement, the judge allowed Will to address Diddy directly. He rose from the witness chair, walked slowly forward, stared him in the eye. You built an empire out of manipulation, he said. You called it success. You called it culture. You called it love. But all you built was fear. Diddy didn't speak. He just sat there, silent. His lawyer whispered frantically into his ear, but Will didn't blink. I saw what you did to those girls, Will said, his voice low and unwavering. I saw what you did to me. I heard the things you said when you thought I wasn't listening. You broke people for sport. Then, without flinching, Will reached into his pocket. He pulled out a photo, aged, worn at the corners. This was me in 2004, right before the first party. He held it up for the courtroom to see. That's the man I used to be. I haven't seen him in years. Then he turned to the jury. If you think this is just about Cassie, or about me, or about one night in some mansion, you're not seeing the whole picture. His voice rang clear. This is about a network of power built to silence truth. And if we don't tear it down, it keeps going. Finally, Will looked at Diddy one last time. You once said nobody parties like Diddy. Well, nobody lies like you either. Then he walked back to the stand, gathered his things, and exited the courtroom without a backward glance. And Diddy? He sat there, pale, unblinking, fingers trembling. Because for the first time in decades, he wasn't the one controlling the room. When Will Smith stepped down from the witness stand, he didn't look like a man who had won anything. He looked like someone who had finally stopped running. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even the judge appeared shaken. Some jurors were visibly emotional, tears in their eyes. And Diddy? For the first time since the trial began, he had nothing left to say. Outside, Will didn't wave. He didn't smile for the cameras. He didn't posture. He simply walked out the courthouse, head held high, shoulders bearing the invisible weight of 2 decades of trauma. When asked later by reporters if he felt relieved, he answered simply, "Relief isn't the right word. It's just finished." But outside the courtroom, the world was just beginning to unravel. Hollywood went into quiet panic. Executives canceled meetings. Agencies paused deals. Directors and producers who once toasted will now found themselves dodging calls from journalists. The same people who once called him family were suddenly issuing boilerplate statements about deep concern and commitment to truth. Behind closed doors, crisis teams mobilized. PR firms circulated memos urging their clients to publicly distance themselves from Sean Combs. But the internet remembered. Old clips resurfaced of Diddy brushing shoulders with Hollywood's elite. Party footage where people looked more haunted than happy. Interview segments where celebrities awkwardly dodged questions. A video of Will from years ago, visibly recoiling when Diddy's name was mentioned. And then, the most painful of all, scenes from the Fresh Prince era, where fans now claim he was smiling through something. The public wasn't just shocked. They were furious. Furious that Will Smith, of all people, had to carry this in silence. Furious that for years, whispers were dismissed as conspiracy. Furious that the system protected the predator and punished the truth-teller. But Will didn't retreat. The next day, he posted one photo online. A black and white image from 1993. Him on a film set, young, radiant, smiling into the sun. No hashtags. No captions. Just a line. He didn't know what was coming. But he made it through. I'm proud of him. The response was instant. Millions of shares. Tens of thousands of comments. Celebrities. Survivors. Activists. Fathers. Sons. Strangers. You gave us a voice, one comment read. If we can speak, so can we. Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, chaos brewed. Diddy's legal team scrambled behind the scenes. Rumors swirled that new subpoenas were incoming, not just for artists and assistants, but for executives at record labels, streaming platforms, even media conglomerates. Will's testimony hadn't just shaken a man, it cracked an entire machine. Word spread. More tapes exist. Not just audio, but video. Some said they involved other high-profile figures. The court sealed them for now, but insiders whispered, if even one leaks, it could flip the entire industry upside down. Will didn't return to work. He declined interviews, canceled appearances, but he wasn't hiding. Sources close to him said he was spending time with his children, rebuilding what matters. One friend told Variety, anonymously, he's healing now, for the first time in years. He's not pretending anymore. Before court adjourned that day, the judge made a statement, brief but unforgettable. What we heard today was not just testimony. It was a reckoning, and this court acknowledges the courage it took to deliver it. The final image of the day wasn't Diddy. It wasn't even Will. It was the jury, sitting motionless, eyes wide, hearts heavy. And in that silence, one truth echoed through the entire courtroom, the industry, and the world beyond. The era of silence was over.